Manager, Benjamin Michael.
To review your messages, press 1. First message.
Hello there. My name is Howard Williams. I'm a member of the class of 1948 at Wesleyan University. I am interested in contacting any person at WESU who might be interested in the lost history of WESAM from 1946 to 1948. I repeat, I'm a member of the class of 1948, and I owned, yes, literally owned WESAM from 1946 to 1948 when I placed it in the hands of a group. I hope to hear from someone. Thank you.
End of message. To save it in the archives, press 9.
Welcome back. Your dreams were your ticket out. Welcome back to that same old place that you laughed about. Well, the names have all changed since you hung around. But those dreams...
Hi, I'm Ben Michael. Thanks for joining us on Welcome Back, a radio show exploring the lives and stories of some of the many folks who've passed through the WESU studios over the years. Through these conversations and stories, we explore the rich history of one of the first student-owned and operated radio stations in the country. We also talk about the value of WESU as a service to the Wesleyan community, as well as our listeners throughout the Connecticut River Valley and beyond. At the top of the show, you heard a voicemail message I was delighted to receive one day back in September of 2013. I felt it was particularly auspicious as I was starting to figure out ways that we could celebrate our upcoming 75th anniversary. That phone message led to several conversations with Howard and ultimately a 14-page handwritten account from him about the predecessor of WESU, WESAM, in the late 1940s. On today's program, you'll hear from Howard in his own words. He talks about inheriting the station by chance when he first arrived at the Wesleyan campus, developing student interest and a management structure, popular programming of the day, and a surprising relationship to broadcast pioneer and Connecticut native Franklin Malcolm Doolittle. And be sure to stick around to the end of the program for his epilogue, which I think is a particularly moving and poignant account of the role of college and community radio within the world of media.
My name is Howard Williams, and this is a recording of some memories of the 2 years and 5 months during which I owned radio station WESAM, Wesleyan University, Middletown, Connecticut. In the beginning, I arrived on the Wesleyan campus the first week of February 1946. That first day was devoted to registering, getting a room assignment, and filling out forms to qualify for the GI education bill. The government was going to pay for tuition, books, dormitory lodging, and pay each ex-GI $69 per month. Compared to the Army, this was a promotion, except for the fact that in the Army they fed you. We were expected to feed ourselves and live the high life out of the $69 per. On the second day on campus, while checking out Downey House, which used to be the campus meet and greet spot with the Wesleyan post office, a cafeteria patronized primarily by visitors to campus, a bulletin board which contained room assignments, class schedules, notices of extracurricular club meetings, and other activities, including the current film showing at the downtown movie house. Plus, a handwritten note that caught my eye. It said, "Anyone interested in broadcast radio, meet me in the basement of Clark Hall at 3 o'clock this afternoon." Now, the chap I found there turned out to be the last student left of a small group that had operated WES during the war. What happened next transpired in less than 15 minutes. There was so much to remember, my brain could not hold it all. Among the lost memories was the fellow's name, a lapse that has bothered me to this day. He was scheduled to be picked up in 15 minutes, was leaving Wesleyan, having completed his studies, and was headed for a distant part of the country. Since no one else had shown up, he used the 15 minutes to tell me what he knew of the history of WES, conducted me on a tour of the control room and studio, showed me the transmission equipment, the turntables, and volume controls, instructed me on how to put the station on the air, handed me a cardboard box full of papers, including an FCC document, which he said was the equivalent of a broadcast license. Then he said, "It's yours now," and he was gone. I don't know how much time passed before I realized that I was sitting on a stool in the control room with a key in my hand. Something needed to be done. Posting a note on the Downey House bulletin board did not hold much promise based on the sad results so far that day. I locked the door, went upstairs into the sunshine, and started over to College Row. I stopped everyone I met, faculty, staff, or student, and asked them to come to a meeting that night at 6:45 if they would like to work on WES radio. I forget where I placed the meeting or why I chose 6:45. If they were not interested in working with WES, I asked them to tune into the station at 4 p.m. the next Monday. That was the first day of regular classes, and would they please pass the word to anyone they met. 14 students came to the meeting. From that number, we elected a program manager, a board of directors that consisted of 4 non-freshman ex-GIs, and myself, who was either a freshman or a sophomore, according to how you counted the academic credits I had from pre-war attendance at an engineering university, plus a number of students who promised to bring their own records and be responsible for 1 hour of airtime each. At 4 p.m. Monday, we went on the air with announcements of a full schedule from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., 5 days a week, and a format of music plus news of campus events. The technical work was handled by several students who were short-wave enthusiasts, a popular hobby at the time, whereby either by Morse code or voice transmission, they contacted other hobbyists around the world. The headquarters of the governing body of their hobby, the American Radio Relay League, was located in Newington, Connecticut, a suburb of Hartford, and less than an hour's hitchhike from Middletown. Over the next 2 years, they were very kind to us with technical know-how, occasionally helping us out when we needed replacements for failing or blown vacuum tubes or other nitty-gritty items. All expenses were paid for by our staff, much like dues in a club, but completely on a voluntary basis. Later, we established a fund for operating expenses, but still on a voluntary basis. We even had small contributions from the general campus population. Within 2 weeks of going on air, we had a large response from would-be radio drama scriptwriters. Before TV became the primary supplier of home entertainment, radio dramas were an important literary medium. The 30s and 40s of the 20th century were the golden age of the genre, with such famous examples as Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast with his Mercury Theater group, Norman Corwin's On a Note of Triumph, celebrating the end of World War II, and Dylan Thomas's frequently adapted Under Milkwood, originally written for BBC Radio. Not only a literary exercise, audio dramas were an industry, with every regional broadcaster supporting local radio theater groups and writers, scheduling them in prime-time evening hours, marketing the shows heavily as a prestige advertising buy. WES received so many scripts and ideas for scripts, we set up a committee to evaluate them all. At the same time, it seemed all theater department students at Wesleyan wanted to act in or produce drama shows. However, in my view, the number one problem was quite mundane. WES had no sound effects. No sound effects, no dramas. Planning for the new school year. Before the summer break of 1946, we all decided that if we wanted to be taken seriously as a real radio station, it would be a wise move to add Saturday to our schedule, if possible from noon until 10 p.m., or possibly even 11 p.m. And would it not be exciting if we could broadcast the Wesleyan football games, both home, that would be easy, and away games, easy if you could afford it. I had decided to live in Connecticut. So, for tax, voting, legal, and Social Security purposes, I listed my address as the street address of the administrative office in South College. Thus, when I visited family in Brooklyn, New York, it was just a visit. But when I returned to campus, I was coming home. Living on campus gave me a chance to make plans for the WES fall seasons. In addition to contacting the local phone company to make arrangements for phone feeds from the stadiums of the away games, I was able to locate sources for royalty-free radio scripts and line up some sources who could regularly send us Wesleyan University schedules, news of faculty doings, reports on club meetings, athletic team scores, and other news that could help make WES less dependent on and perhaps faster than the campus newspaper. My dealings with the phone company were made easier because I knew the territory. I was one of the group of students who operated the college phone switchboard during the time that the regular operator and receptionist was not on duty. We substitutes ran the board at noon times and 5 to 9 p.m. on weekdays, plus 1 to 6 p.m. on Saturdays. There were 10 outside lines, each with a jack to plug into 50 phones around campus. Outgoing calls had to be plugged into one of the outside lines. WES was a recognized campus activity. However, we received no financial support. Thus, the fact that our phone expenses through the central switchboard, as well as our electrical usage, were paid by the university was indeed a generous contribution. To keep expenses down, Our feed from the away game stadiums was put through the central switchboard to the West phone as a simple, long-distance collect call. A primitive arrangement, but it worked well. For home games, we simply ran a line from the Andrus Field press box through a Clark Hall basement window to the studio. FM. Along with the furniture and electronic equipment left in the WES control room, some of it going back to the 1939 startup, was a wooden box. It was on the console to the left of the turntables. It was about 15 inches wide, 10 inches deep, and 9 inches high, with on-off switch, a tuning knob, and 2 volume controls, which, by trial and error, I found controlled the sound coming through its loudspeaker and separately controlled an output that fed directly to our transmitter. There was a single insulated wire sticking out of its back for about 32 inches, obviously some kind of antenna. After a time, I found some correspondence in that cardboard box that had been handed to me. The wood box was a gift to WES from Mr. Franklin M. Doolittle. Today, in the age of the computer, I have been able, sitting in my easy chair, to assemble much information about Mr. Doolittle that I wish I had known in 1946. He was a true pioneer in the early age of radio in America. Born in 1893, he founded, in 1922, WDRC, Connecticut's first commercial radio station. In 1924, he received the first patent for the binaural transmission of sound. It required 2 transmitters. In 1927, he secured the first patent for binaural broadcasting with a single antenna. In 1936, Mr. Doolittle founded AM radio station W1SXL, a high audio frequency experimental broadcasting station using a tower on West Peak of Meriden Mountain, Connecticut. WQXR New York was at this time the better-known radio station experimenting with broadcasts over a double-wide bandwidth assigned by the FCC. These studies led to what was called high fidelity. On January 16, 1939, Major Edwin H. Armstrong, professor of electrical engineering at Columbia University, announced the invention of frequency-modulated radio. On January 17, 1939, note the concurrency of dates, Mr. Franklin M. Doolittle announced a series of experimental broadcasts free of static and interrupting noises of any kind would be undertaken in the spring. The 2 men were probably working together. On May 13, 1939, at a cost of $20,000, Doolittle put America's first commercial FM station, W1XPW, on the air at 2:30 p.m. Then it was on the air from 3 p.m. to 12 midnight, airing classical music every day, and later simulcasting radio station WDRC AM. Our wooden box at WES was an FM receiver, and we had Mr. Doolittle's permission to simulcast his signal from Meriden Mountain, which we did whenever WES was not broadcasting our own programs. Autumn 1946. Everyone at WES was pleased that we received so many compliments for our broadcasts of Wesleyan's football team's away games. There were very few students on campus who owned autos. America was not yet a nation on wheels. The interstate highway system was 10 years away from its beginnings. Live sports broadcasts from such distant places as Williamstown and Amherst, Massachusetts, were a novelty for a small university. However, the strong positive reaction we got from our broadcasts of the home games surprised everyone. No one had realized how many students, faculty, and staff members had things to do around campus on a Saturday afternoon that kept them away from the game. The typical reaction was that it was so enjoyable to be within earshot of the loud cheers from Anders Field, and at the same time to get an explanation of the cause of the cheers from the WES broadcast. The broadcasts of the football games were made even more popular by the fact that for both the 1946 and 1947 seasons, Wesleyan was undefeated. Theater season 1946. The WES theater people, they didn't have a separate group name, had been collecting some sound effects equipment. There were some recorded sounds on electrical transcriptions, 16-inch discs played at 33 1/3. For the large, loud sounds, cannon, ocean liners, explosions, railroad and industrial engines, elephants or lions, etc. However, it remains amazing to this day how many sounds can be simulated with a few items in the studio. 5 inches of water in a metal bucket with the help of hands and fingers can produce an amazing variety of sounds, from splashes to trickles, babbling brooks, and violent waves crashing on a rocky coast. Gunshots with the thick end of a pool cue hitting the old leather sofa in the broadcast studio. There were cocktail glasses to tink, handbells, chains to rattle. Broken dinner plates could make a satisfying crash time after time. Crumpling cellophane made an extremely realistic fire, house, or camp. And every radio actor at the time knew that 2 or 3 actors mumbling the word rhubarb sound exactly like a crowd in a Shakespearean play or a hotel lobby. Dramas and readings were presented on Thursday evenings, with occasional Friday evening specials. Saturdays were devoted to variety, with attempts at humorous skits or comedy teams, a comic plus straight man. I believe the variety was provided by the number of changes in the Saturday night performers. Many were willing to try, but my memory tells me few succeeded in being funny consistently. Well, make that none. We could have made a sound effects recording with nothing but groans in reaction to the supposed humor. A real radio station. During the school year 1947-48, WES added Sunday programming, thereby fulfilling the directors and staff's desire to become as much like a professional enterprise as possible. We began to bring some discipline to our music broadcasts, assigning producers and asking our announcers to choose themes for their programs, be it devoted to jazz, dance, Broadway shows, Western, folk, country, popular songs, or classical. The term announcer in those days had a special connotation. It was an honored profession. Only with the onset of World War II had announcers and actors completely stopped wearing tuxedos and evening dress for network broadcasts, as befitting such a momentous occasion. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the first recorded use of the term disc jockey, the letters DJ, or spelled out D-E-E-J-A-Y, is in 1956. The use of the term was an indication of the growing atmosphere of informality that has become characteristic of radio in modern times. It was coming to WES very carefully. So, with our announcers, our actors, producers, writers, news sources, technical crew, and most importantly, a steady and responsive audience, we felt we had every right to consider ourselves to be a part of the growing radio industry. A staff member had located and installed outside the door to the control room an electric sign that flashed the message, "On air." We were that in every sense of those words. Time to go. By graduation day in June of 1948, I had signed the papers necessary to turn WES over to the board of directors. 2 weeks later, the girl I had met in July of 47, when we both worked part-time for a Hartford radio station, were married in the Wesleyan Chapel. As it turned out, in 62 years of happy marriage, neither of us was affiliated with radio, nor have I had any reason to return to the Wesleyan campus. Epilogue. Originally, wireless telegraphy had been thought of as a better way of sending messages one at a time, thus the use of the word telegraph. Soon after came the concept of casting the words, or music, like seeds over a broad area to better germinate, and it was discovered that money could be made doing this. Some 75 years ago, groups of young people began putting together bits of electronic stuff, and without intending to do so, showed that broadcast radio did not belong solely to the moneymakers. At school and university campuses, they bumbled their way into a new sphere of broadcasting that allowed new ideas to be examined without the test of economic feasibility or the approval of their elders. This was a far cry from the way the industry operated at that time, when every station tried to attract the entire audience 15 minutes at a time, and in trying to please everyone, satisfied no one. WES-AM was one of the earliest of the university radio stations, and together with the other school-affiliated broadcasters everywhere were and still are the voice of youth in America. May it always be so. The end.
That's all for today's episode of Welcome Back, where we reconnect with people who've been involved with WESU over the past 7+ decades. On today's program, we heard a personal account of the history of WESU's predecessor, WES-AM, from 1946 through 1948, from the man who owned it as an undergrad student at Wesleyan who graduated in 1948, Howard Williams. Thanks for listening. I'm Ben Michael, and I'll catch you next time.